In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit, one God. Amen. Dear ones, I want to tell you how incredibly happy I was. I received a piece of news a few days ago that energized me for the whole day. I was so bursting with energy and joy that day. The news was this. I wrote to the monastery of St. John the Forerunner in Goldendale, Washington, which publishes the life and the writings of Gerondissa Makrina, Vasopoulou, in the book Words of the Heart. A couple weeks ago, I put out a video on some of, I do the series on my favorite life-changing Orthodox books, and I talked about this particular book. And at the time that I did that video, and I really don't think I did the book honor. I don't think I did Gerondissa Makrina honor. But I have such an immense love for her. At the time that I was doing that video, during the evenings, I was reading the life of Gerondissa Makrina to my children. Now, I come from a good German family. There's German on both sides, my mother's and my father's side. And as good Germans, we're very stoic. There's not a lot that really makes me very emotional. I don't weep or cry easily at all. I have my eyes well up with tears every time I read the life of Gerondissa Makrina, and this was the third time that I'd read these pages in this book. And so I wrote to the monastery, and I asked for Gerondissa there. I asked their Gerondissa if I could have a blessing to read the life of Gerondissa Makrina on YouTube. And I explained that I had done this recent video on my favorite Orthodox books, and I had done a short video on Words of the Heart. And I received an email in which one of the sisters wrote to me and said that explains why it is that their sales of that book had increased so significantly for the past 2 weeks, and every day they were shipping out more and more. I cannot tell you how much I was bursting with energy and joy that day. I am so glad. When I do these readings, and when I talk about my favorite books, these are videos that don't get as many views as many of the others. So in doing this video, and I'll probably be reading this in 2 parts, admittedly it's longer, I want to encourage you, if you're listening to this, please share this video and encourage others to watch. This is a life change. I'm telling you, I will do my best. I think my Germanness will break through, and I won't break down in tears. But this is one of my favorite lives I've ever read, and it is so encouraging. It is so inspiring. It will make you want to pray. It will make you love Gerondissa Makrina. It will make you want to buy this book, which I hope more people do. It will make you want to imitate her in her purity. Please share this video and encourage others. Encourage others to watch or just listen. Just listen to the life of Gerondissa Makrina. I share with you, before I begin, this is on a wood panel. I had a picture of Gerondissa Makrina placed, and this is at my prayer corner at home. Currently, I have an iconographer making an icon of her. She's not officially glorified yet. She proposed in 1995. I think enough time has passed that she should be glorified, but it matters not. This is my small little, I guess we can't call it an icon, but picture on a panel of Gerondissa Makrina. And so I ask her blessings as I begin to read this. Forgive me as I struggle with some of the transliterated Greek words, but you'll work through me. So we'll read probably half of it right now, and then in a week or so I will put out the video with the second half of her life. And I thank the Gerondissa at St. John the Forerunner Monastery and the sisters there for not only for publishing this, but for Gerondissa's blessing to be able to share this life with you. So the biography of the glorious Gerondissa Makrina Vasopoulou, who was born in 1921 and reposed in 1995. Origin and birth. Asia Minor, the birthplace of saints from the first years of Christianity. Throughout the entire Byzantine period, and continuing after the fall of Constantinople, offered the Church spiritual giants. The choir of these saints, both known and unknown, includes Saint Basil the Great, Saint Gregory the Theologian, Saint Gregory of Nyssa, Saint Makrina, Saint Irene Chrysovalantou, Saint Gregory Palamas, and more recently, Saint Arsenius of Cappadocia, Saint Paisius of the Holy Mountain, Geronda Hieronymus of Aegina, Saint Iakavos Tsalikis, and so many others. The renowned monastic centers, Cappadocia, Olympus of Bithynia, Latros, etc., nurtured and supported the Greek population with living piety, even during difficult times, up until the Asia Minor catastrophe. This holy land was the birthplace of Gerondissa Makrina of blessed memory, foundress and abbess from 1963 to 1995 of the holy monastery of Panagia Odigitria, Portaria Volos. Born in the year 1921 to God-fearing parents Photius and Anastasia Vassopoulos, Gerondissa's birth name was Maria Vassopoulou. Maria's father and mother moved to Asia Minor for work purposes and finally settled in the village of Hagileri, where Maria was born. The village was under the ecclesiastical jurisdiction of the holy metropolis of Ephesus, and its church was dedicated to Saint Haralambos, who was honored with great reverence by the Christian villagers. They also held a radiant 3-day celebration of the Feast of the Holy Apostles. The church of Saint Haralambos was simple, with a 3-story bell tower. The village school was also located on its grounds. From the beginning, Maria's parents cultivated love and reverence for Saint Haralambos in the tender souls of their children. Maria had a special reverence for the saint. After a certain personal experience, to which she refers in one of her homilies, she always honored his memory. Maria's parents were pious people, virtuous, hardworking, industrious, honest, and much loved by their fellow villagers. Photius worked as a merchant and secretly practiced the virtue of almsgiving. He was accustomed to leaving baskets of food at night on the doorsteps of families in need. Anastasia taught embroidery and was an especially quiet and peace-loving person. She lived as a nun in the world, with modesty, attentiveness, and prayer. Photius and Anastasia worked spiritually with fear of God and kept his commandments. They instilled these virtues in their children from a very young age, bringing them up in training and admonition of the Lord, in hopes that their good seeds would produce fine fruits. God granted them 4 children, Nikephoros, Georgia, Maria, and George. The first 3 children were born in Magnesia of Asia Minor, but Nikephoros and Georgia died at a very young age. Their last child, George, was born in Greece in 1926 when Maria was 5 years old. In 1922, the Asia Minor catastrophe brought about the uprooting of Hellenism in Asia Minor from its ancestral homeland. The Vassopoulos family returned to Greece with Maria, their 6-month-old infant. In her mother's agonizing efforts to reach the boat that would take them to Greece, she was continually pressured to throw the child into the sea in order to save her own life. However, with immense faith, she held her small daughter tightly in her arms. After tremendous difficulties and dangers, the Greek refugees reached their motherland, Greece. They carried with them faith and hope in God and a will for a new life, as well as priceless treasures, countless miracle-working icons and holy relics, which they rescued with great piety and self-sacrifice. The refugees from Hagileri settled mainly in Nea Ionia of Volos and Lagada of Thessaloniki, while some settled in Nicaea of Piraeus, New Chalcedon, and Nea Ionia of Attica, or Attiki. When the Vassopoulos family disembarked at Piraeus, their first destination was Karditsa, where they stayed for a year or 2 in a refugee shelter, later moving permanently to the refugee settlement of Nea Ionia in Volos. Childhood years. Maria grew up in the refugee neighborhoods of Nea Ionia, where she began going to school. She was an excellent student, but due to exceptionally harsh conditions and the difficult circumstances of her life, she was forced to give up her schooling in the early elementary grades. Although her general education was lacking, she loved learning the things of God and would continue to study the Holy Scriptures, lives of the saints, hymnology, and the ascetical works of the Holy Fathers diligently throughout her life. As a young child, she was not interested in childish games like her peers. Despite her tender age, she was distinguished for her maturity and serious nature. It appeared that God was preparing her for a different path. When she was 7 years old, the Lord called her to the angelic life of monasticism in a blessed and grace-filled way. One spring day, As Maria was playing in a field near her house with other children, she asked them all to come together and pray. Pondering with her childish mind, she asked the other children how they could reach God. With simplicity and faith, Maria suggested the possibility of reaching him by placing many tables and chairs on top of each other. Then, when they began to chant, "Lord, have mercy," she heard an inner voice call her to the monastic life. Having already within her the holy desire to reach and touch God, a divine transformation came into her heart at that moment, and for the first time she felt such compunction that she began to cry. She left the other children to continue playing and ran home, where she fell weeping before the holy icons. Maria's mother, worried at seeing her in this condition, took her daughter in her arms and tenderly asked what had happened. Sobbing, Maria answered that she wanted to become a nun. She did not truly understand the full meaning of those words, as no one had ever spoken to her about the monastic life as a special path leading to God. She did not even know what the garments of monastics looked like. The desire for monasticism was manifested in her soul at the moment of her improvised, innocent prayer. Every time her father would return home from work, Maria had the loving custom of taking off his shoes and putting his slippers on his feet to relieve him after his long, hard day. That evening, however, Maria did not appear. Worried, Photius inquired of his wife, who informed him of the events of that day. He called for Maria and asked her to explain to him exactly what had happened. When she answered that she desired to become a nun, her father asked her 3 times, "What does it mean to be a nun?" Little Maria shrugged her tiny shoulders without answering. Her father understood that it was a calling from God. He smiled at her, and with all the affection of his fatherly heart, he encouraged her divine yearning for the monastic life. Then Photius asked Maria to bring him water in one of the glasses intended for guests. As if he had before him a mature, responsible person his own age rather than a 7-year-old child, he blessed her, saying, "May you be a good nun, my child." The path she would follow in life was now appointed by God and blessed by her father. Maria cultivated the divine calling in her soul all the years she lived in the world, and with the blessing of her parents, progressed prudently and bravely until the time she was made worthy of the monastic tonsure and the angelic schema. The happy, carefree years of Maria's childhood spent with her parents were very short-lived. As she would say, "I would later long for those years with tears. I lost the warmth of a family nest and was deprived forever of the affectionate embrace of my parents." Those years with her parents' God-loving guidance and counsels sealed her pure soul in Christ. Her perfect adherence in word and deed to their teachings brought honor to their memory. She would frequently recall the wise words of her father, "My child, for the worst thing that someone does to you, you will in turn do for them the best. Show your love to everyone, and God will repay you abundantly." And so from childhood, Maria showed love and great respect to everyone, even if they wronged her. When Maria was 8 years old, her father had a vision from God about his approaching death, as well as the death of his wife, revealing that their children would be left alone. An angel of the Lord appeared to him and said, "Photius, on clean Monday at 4 o'clock I will come to take you, and exactly 1 year later I will come for your wife. But do not worry about your children. A great hand will cover them, and divine grace will protect them." Maria's father received the divine message with tremendous faith. Just as he was informed, so it came to be. 8 days before he passed away, Photius spoke with his wife to prepare her for his approaching end and to inform her of her own impending death 1 year later. In tears, he strove to console her with the divine promise that their 2 children would be protected by God's providence. Indeed, Photius fell asleep peacefully on Clean Monday of 1929. 1 year later, on Clean Monday of 1930, his wife, Anastasia, fell asleep in the Lord. At the age of 9, Maria and her 4-year-old brother, George, were deprived of the care and affection of their parents. The pain of their loss was tremendous. Gerondissa would later relate that following her mother's death, she would frequently go to her parents' simple and humble grave, digging in the dirt with her little hands, searching in her childlike simplicity to find them. Little Maria sought love in the embrace of friends and neighbors, but when they tried to tie bows in her hair, she resisted and pulled them out, asserting, "I don't want such things, because I am going to become a nun." The harsh and bitter years of life as an orphan became even more difficult because of the poverty of the struggling Greek people under the German occupation during the Second World War. Gerondissa would later convey how there were times when they did not even have one piece of bread, and death from starvation loomed before their eyes. The neighbors helped the two orphans as much as they could, and as much as the needs of their own families would allow. Occasionally, by God's providence, the two siblings would find a basket of food in their yard. They would stand at watch from their window, but they were never able to see who left it. After her parents fell asleep in the Lord, Maria took on all the household responsibilities, including the role of mother to raise her 4-year-old brother, George. Maria and her brother lived in a small refugee home that shared a roof with the adjacent household of their unmarried aunt, which was a common way to build refugee shelters. This aunt was short-tempered and had the evil habit of blaspheming. She often spoke harshly to Maria and beat her. Maria, however, never talked back, but with great forbearance, true love, and respect towards her aunt, endured her bad behavior. Every time her aunt blasphemed, little Maria refused to eat her food and remained hungry until her aunt stopped blaspheming. Thus, enlightened by God, she managed little by little to convert her aunt to the path of piety, and convinced her in the end to confess and receive Holy Communion before her death. Securing the daily means for survival was a primary concern for the two orphaned children. For this reason, their aunt pressured little Maria to find work to support themselves. Though only 9 years old, Maria worked for the first time in the home of a wealthy family. As soon as she arrived, she was given an apron and a towel and was asked to wash the dishes. The cupboard where the dishes were kept contained a stack of 50 plates. As little Maria attempted to take down the first row of plates and then the second row, she broke a plate. Due to her sensitivity and delicate conscience, she became very upset, began to cry, and returned to her home right away. Her aunt immediately asked her sternly why she had returned so soon. Maria explained to her that she was unable to continue working due to the damage she had accidentally caused. She later found work shelling almonds for a small company. Often her youthful little fingers would bleed from using a rock to crack the shells. From early childhood, Maria loved the Panagia immensely and placed all her hope in her, even more so after she lost her parents. She had the Panagia as her mother and entrusted all her problems and requests to her. When, as a vulnerable orphan, Maria began to work, the merciful Lord strengthened her in her monastic calling with a wondrous vision. Maria found herself in a beautiful, very beautiful, lush green garden. A woman clothed in black approached her, holding the hand of a 3-year-old child. Suddenly, the child left his mother's hand and began to run in the grass. The woman then called Maria by name and asked her to catch the child, promising to give her a gift if she managed to do so. Maria accepted willingly, and after great effort, she grabbed the child and embraced him, asking, "How sweet is Christ?" The child did not answer, but placing both hands around his mouth, he blew into her mouth, immediately filling her soul with sweetness and fragrance. The woman in black then took 2 rings and placed one on the finger of the little child and one on Maria's finger. For the next few years, Maria did not want to taste anything sweet and risk losing the inexpressible feeling of grace that strengthened her decision to become a nun. After her spiritual engagement, Maria began to wear a head covering and only dark-colored clothing, living from that time on as a nun in the world. Along with her spiritual struggle, Maria's daily effort to survive continued, forcing her to work again as a housemaid for another family. One day, a hieromonk visited the home where she was working. At that time, Maria was attempting to light a fire in the boiler to heat water so that she could wash clothes, but was having difficulty because the fire kept going out. The hieromonk, seeing Maria's sorrow, approached her and asked with fatherly care what was wrong. Maria explained the problem she was having lighting the fire. The hieromonk made the sign of the cross over the wood 3 times in the name of the Holy Trinity and told her to blow on it with faith. Immediately, the fire lit. This incident provided the opportunity for Maria to become acquainted with the hieromonk. His name was Father Ephrem Karoyanis, and he became her spiritual father in the world. Hieromonk Ephrem was from the Synodia of Gerondissa Joseph the Hesychist, an Athonite elder, and was serving as the parish priest of the Church of St. Apostolos the New in Volos. Father Ephrem brought the Hesychistic tradition of the Holy Fathers to the area, teaching Noetic prayer and acquainting many people in the city of Volos with the Holy Mountain and Gerondissa Joseph the Hesychist. Throughout the numerous difficulties in Maria's life, divine providence always carved the path of her spiritual journey in a wondrous way. At about the age of 11, Maria worked again as a housemaid in the home of a wealthy woman. One day, while she was cleaning the house, two men came to visit the lady of the house and sat down in the living room to speak with her. From the adjacent room, Maria heard the lady ask them how much money they would give her to purchase her young housemaid. Maria immediately understood their evil intentions, and she quickly opened the window, jumped out into the street, and ran away crying. She was so distressed that she could not remember the way home. A man who saw her in that state offered to help her, and she asked him to show her the way home. Thus she was saved from grave danger. The grace of God always protected little Maria and soon guided her to a better work environment. Some ladies from the refugee settlement suggested that she work at the Mansagu cigarette factory in Volos. Maria was about 12 years old, but looked older. The ladies presented her to the factory manager as 13 so she would be eligible to work there. She was hired, but due to her young age, she only counted boxes for the first 2 years. The manager of the factory, the ever-memorable Apostolos Somoglu, and his wife Magdalene were pious people who regularly attended the Church of St. Apostolos. They had the same spiritual father as Maria. One day, the manager called Maria to the workroom where they assigned her on a trial basis to count cigarettes. Maria was a very fast worker and had twice the production of her co-workers. Maria practiced the prayer, it was the Jesus prayer, unceasingly while she worked and tried not to let her work disrupt her spiritual exercise. She prayed that God would illumine her to grasp the exact number of cigarettes needed for each package without counting, so as not to disrupt her prayer. Years later, Gerondissa related how she would say, with childish simplicity and much faith in Christ, "My Christ, I will say the prayer to you, and you count the cigarettes." Miraculously, every time the manager would inspect her work, he never found a deficiency in the packages she prepared. When they offered to raise her wages to reward her increased output, she preferred to share the extra prepared packages with her coworkers. At work, Maria was distinguished by her polite manners, moral standards, philotimo, modesty, and silence. According to the testimony of her coworkers, her face glowed and her mouth was fragrant from unceasing prayer. With her first wages from the factory, she arranged for the 40-day liturgies to be served for the repose of the souls of her parents. Her spiritual father undertook this task, and Maria attended every day. At 3 o'clock in the morning, she got ready and left by foot on a 1-hour journey from Nea Ionia to the Church of St. Apostolos the New. After the divine liturgy, she went straight to work. Throughout the days of the 40 liturgies, she also prayed at home for the souls of her parents. When the day of the 40th liturgy came, right before she woke up, in between sleep and wakefulness, she found herself in a very green garden with blossoming trees, like almond trees in the springtime. Hearing in her mind that this place belonged to her parents, she was moved with emotion and began to call for help. When they appeared before her, she asked them with yearning if they were at rest. They joyfully answered, "Where we were was good, but now we are even better off." After the vision, she got ready and went to the last divine liturgy. As soon as it was over and her spiritual father gave her endidro, he asked her to wait so he could talk to her. After a little while, Hieromonk Ephrem approached her and asked how she felt in prayer about her parents. Before she could answer, he told her that he had seen them the night before exactly as she had seen them. After that, Maria realized what great value the 40 liturgies have, and later, when she became a spiritual guide to others, she would always recommend this to people, both for the repose of departed souls and for health and strength for people in difficult situations. There's a small picture of Father Ephrem Karoyanis, her spiritual father at the time. Hopefully that shows up. Adolescence. Far from the delights of the world, Maria continued with precision on her spiritual journey and remained steadfast in her sacred decision to become a nun. For this reason, the all-good Lord and giver of gifts allowed her, even from a young age, to live certain wondrous events in order for her to acquire beneficial experience and support in her spiritual struggle. One morning, while holding her prayer rope, on her way to work, the devil appeared to her on the road and said, "What I would do to you if you were not holding what you have in your hand." From that time on, she was even more persistent with the prayer rope and the prayer. When she did not have a prayer rope with her, she would rub her overcoat with her little fingers as she said the prayer, so much that the fabric at the spot of the coat became worn out. As time passed, the difficulties of poverty continually worsened, Maria felt embarrassed to seek help in managing her obligations, so rather than having both her and her brother suffer from hunger, in 1935 she decided to send George to their uncle in Lagada outside of Thessaloniki. She did not go herself so as not to be a burden. She was now all alone, with Christ and the Panagia as her only protection and hope. Her brother soon left Lagada for Thessaloniki and lived there with his godfather for nearly 6 years until he finished high school. During that time, Maria had not heard anything from him, and she greatly feared for his life. So great was her concern that she considered having a memorial service done for him, believing that her brother was no longer alive. However, she first arranged that a divine liturgy in honor of Saint Minas be celebrated, and in less than 1 week she received a letter from George. He wrote to her that an invisible hand had suddenly urged him to send her a letter, and he informed her that soon he would be returning. When he returned from Thessaloniki, George stayed for a little while in Volos, and then went to Athens in an effort to find work. Maria supported George financially and morally from time to time, and also from time to time went to Athens to care for him. Throughout the various difficulties that arose, Maria would pray that the mercy of God would not abandon them, and begged that someone would be found who could help them. God, the provider of all, soon sent them a wealthy and pious man of Greek descent from Egypt. He was a descendant of the Ambet family, and he had significantly benefited the Greeks in Egypt and had played an important role in the founding of the Sotiria Hospital in Athens, which specialized in the treatment of tuberculosis. This man was a godsend and supported them immensely. He arranged for George to study accounting and foreign languages and secured work for him in the palace. Maria vividly kept her father's final words in her mind: "A great hand will be found to protect the children." And as a result, she always trusted in the providence of God throughout all of her life's difficulties. As she related later, by the grace of God, she and her brother met good people who protected and advised them, showing them much love as if they were their parents. Victoria Moraitu, who lived from 1887 to 1984, was an extremely spiritual person who stood by Maria like a mother. She held a special place in Maria's life during the years she was struggling in the world, and later on during her life as a nun. This was the Blessed Mother of the future Gerondissa Ephraim. This is Gerondissa Ephraim, who came to America, not her spiritual father. Victoria lived with deep spirituality and later became a nun with the name Theophano. She and Maria had the same spiritual father. He would often say to his spiritual children, "All of you together don't equal one Victoria." Because Maria was an orphan, Victoria would give her advice and took interest in her material needs. When Maria would visit her after work, Victoria would give her food. If for some reason Maria did not stop by their house, she would send the food with her son Johnny, yet under Ephraim's name before his monastic tonsure. Concerning the relationship between Maria and his mother, Gerondissa Ephraim later recalled, "During the time, Maria worked for the Mansangu cigarette factory. She would pass by her house each day on her way to work. She had such a bond with my mother, it was indescribable. These two women had great love for each other. They would frequently read and pray all night together with tears and prostrations. Maria had great respect and reverence for Victoria and looked up to her as a mother and a Gerondissa." At that time, prior to the Second World War, Maria's spiritual father had several virtuous young women among his spiritual children in Volos who lived as nuns in the world. Likewise, although she lived and worked in the world, Maria loved asceticism and was devoted with precision to the struggles and duties of the monastic life, which she had desired from childhood. Her unfailing attendance and compunction at the divine services, her personal vigils, prostrations, and noetic prayer, her studying of the scriptures, lives of the saints, and patristic texts, all of these were the joy of her young soul. Her spiritual sisters lived the same holy life. They occupied themselves day and night with the prayer, theoria of paradise, and remembrance of death. After the divine liturgy, they would take Andidro and depart in silence so as not to lose the prayer and the grace of God. Maria went every year with her spiritual sisters to the feast of St. Apostolos the New in the village of St. Lawrence in Pelion. They would remain in prayer and vigil for 3 or 4 days in the saint's church. Crowds of pilgrims would gather there from all of Greece, many of whom were sick and sought healing. On one of their pilgrimages to the church of St. Apostolos, Maria saw a reverend elder who appeared to be an ascetic lying in the courtyard outside the church. He looked exhausted and was quite ill. This holy person had the gift of foresight. He lifted his eyes and, out of all the company of girls standing by him, he looked at Maria, saying, "Come here, you. Go into the neighborhood and ask for a rag rug. Find a rock too, and bring them to me." Maria willingly brought them to the elder. He was comforted and said to her, "My child, I will give you 3 pieces of advice for you to put into practice. Pray the Noetic prayer, Lord Jesus Christ, have mercy on me, continually without ceasing. When you go out of your house and walk down the road, do not look left or right or up. Look only at the ground. Even though you are poor, my child, when a little money comes to you, break it into $50. Then when you find a beggar, give him charity, so that with your $50 and a little charity from other Christians, he can buy some bread." Maria thanked him, and when the pilgrimage was over, she returned to her home, holding in her heart the beneficial counsels she had received from that unknown holy ascetic. Despite her poverty, Maria always practiced almsgiving, a virtue she had received as a sacred trust from her father. After her blessed meeting with the saintly ascetic, she cultivated it to the extreme for the entirety of her life in the world and on into her monastic life. There's small pictures of the young Maria and of Victoria. Victoria's over here on the left, Maria on the right. German occupation. The God-loving Maria, now 19 years old, was striving more and more to experience true life in Christ with her spiritual sisters as co-strugglers. One time, after the Divine Liturgy on August 15th, 1940, that's the Feast of the Dormition, she and 6 other spiritual sisters received andidro, and without eating anything else, went to light the oil lamps in the chapel of St. Nicholas of Cremastu in the neighborhood of St. Onufios in Volos. When they got hungry on the way, Maria said with simplicity, "Wouldn't it be nice if we had a slice of bread and a little fig to eat?" They reached the chapel and with great reverence began to chant and light the oil lamps. When Maria went to light the oil lamp in the holy altar, she saw a little package on the altar table. She took it in her hands with great joy and said to the other girls that it was a gift from St. Nicholas. When they opened it, they found 7 slices of warm bread and a fig for each of them. A month and a half later, they went to the chapel again, but this time, in the holy altar, Maria saw blood mixed with water running from the immaculate side of Christ in the icon on the crucifix, as well as from the crown of thorns. She took some cotton and, filled with awe, very carefully wiped the crucifix. When they left, they went straight to the church of St. Apostolos, the new for Vespers, and they gave the saturated cotton to their spiritual father. He understood that it was a sign that war was near. He announced the incident in his homily and blessed all those in church with the cotton, and at the end of the service. It was the beginning of October of 1940, and indeed, war was formally declared a few days later. The years of the German-Italian occupation were a martyrdom for the Greek people, who suffered terribly from hunger. One day, Maria made the difficult decision to sell some of her mother's embroidery in the suburbs of Larissa in order to cover some of her needs. That night, she stayed in the home of a refugee family she knew. The room they had given her to rest in had a large opening under the door. Throughout the entire night, she heard a noise from the next room as if someone was doing prostrations. When she got up, she peered through the opening under the door and saw a nun praying, bathed in light. An inner voice informed her that it was Saint Paraskevi. In difficult times of pain and deprivation, God consoled her with such experiences of His grace. During the harsh period of the occupation, there were days when Maria did not even have a piece of bread to eat and reached the point of such exhaustion that she said to Christ, "If it is your will, take me, let me die." Outside her little house, a few greens were growing, which she picked up every day to have something to eat. The next day, sometimes even the same day, other greens as big as the one she had just picked would miraculously sprout up at the same spot. She lived from this miracle for 6 months. Sometimes she would wash them and take them to a young girl she was caring for who was sick with tuberculosis. The lack of essential food began to leave its mark on the young Maria. Little by little, she weakened, and hair like peach fuzz began to grow all over her skin, even on her face. From her great weakness, she reached the point where she had difficulty standing up and walking, and she began dragging herself. But the Panagia, protectress of orphans, upon whom she constantly called, did not leave her without help. Maria's spiritual father realized her great deprivation, and as he delivered his homily to his parishioners, he strongly urged them to help the orphan, asking each of them to throw at least one bite of bread into Maria's window every day. After this, Maria gradually began to recover. At one time, it became necessary for Maria and two other girls to go to Zagora to seek help. They went to visit a family on the east side of Pelion who were friends of her parents. Maria hoped to give her father's old watch to his friends in exchange for a little food. She made the decision to part with this watch with pain in her soul, as it was the last thing she had as a keepsake from her father. As soon as these people saw how emaciated Maria was, that she was almost a skeleton, they began to weep. That night, when they offered her homemade bread, Maria was so hungry that she ate an entire loaf, as well as whatever else they gave her. Before the girls departed in the morning, the family gathered food to send home with them, and they gave a sack of potatoes and a small container of oil to Maria. However, she could not carry the load due to her weakness, and so she had some children with an animal help her up the hill to the road. On the way home, they continually came upon patrolling Italian soldiers. This delayed their return until after midnight. As soon as they saw the Italians, the girls would hide in the cliffs and pray, "Thou art a rampart for virgins, O Theotokos and Virgin," from the salutation to the all-holy Theotokos. The Italians, however, taking pity on their hardship, finally offered to help by carrying their load part of the way. Upon approaching her house, after walking for 6 exhausting hours, Maria fainted, no longer able to endure. After some time, when she regained consciousness, she realized that all her food was gone. She understood that someone had taken it. Yet she was not upset, because with the nobility of her soul, for which she was always distinguished, she presumed that the people who had taken the food were very hungry and had even greater need of it. As a result of her many hardships, she began to feel a sharp pain in her side and had trouble breathing. With great effort, she went to the doctor. After he examined her, he diagnosed her with pleurisy. He advised her to buy some bran and heat it, then put it on her side as a compress in order to be cured. When she returned home, since it was not possible for her to buy bran, she warmed a piece of clay tile and placed it on the painful side of her back. Sitting in the dark without even an oil lamp, she was praying to the Panagia and waiting peacefully for her end. At one moment, her dark room lit up, and she beheld a nun approaching who had a red cross stitched on her head covering and was wearing the monastic schema. With much love, the nun asked her, "Are you ill?" Maria answered that she did not feel well, and she complained about the loss of the provisions given to her. The nun consoled Maria, telling her that she would be healed and not to worry. The nun then made the sign of the cross over her and covered her with a blanket, the only thing Maria had kept from her mother. She tucked her in on both sides, saying tenderly that there was nothing seriously wrong, and very soon she would become completely well. Immediately, the pain and exhaustion subsided, the feeling of hunger disappeared, and she felt satiated. Her cousin, who lived across the street, visited her the next morning and inquired about the light that was shining through Maria's window all night. Maria did not reveal to her what had happened. She decided to visit the doctor again to have him listen to her lungs. He scolded her for returning so quickly, but he examined her and, to his great surprise, discovered that her fever was gone and her back, which had been bruised from falling when she lost consciousness the day before, was now healed. She was indeed completely healthy. When Maria wondered who the nun who healed her was, she heard an inner voice saying that it was Saint Paraskevi. Despite the hardships of the occupation, Blessed Maria never neglected her spiritual work or attending church. With willingness and self-sacrifice, she always helped anyone who was in need. Even though she worked 9 to 10 hours a day, she would still wake up every day at 3 in the morning and walk an hour to church. One time as she was walking to church, a German soldier stopped her for being out past curfew. When he was about to seize her, she lifted up her arms, making the sign of the cross over herself 3 times while saying that she was going to church. When the German saw her cross herself, not only did he not arrest her, but he did not hinder her at all from reaching her destination. Another time during the occupation, when it was nearing curfew, her spiritual father suddenly remembered that he had a meeting with someone about a serious matter. He had forgotten about it, and now it was too late. There was not enough time to get there before curfew. Maria, seeing his dilemma, willingly offered to go herself in order to notify the man. She asked only that he pray for her and bless her with the sign of the cross. Maria ran without losing her breath and felt that she was not touching the ground, as if two hands were pushing her. In a flash, she completed her mission, having faith in the prayers and blessing of her spiritual father. Though normally it was a 30-minute distance, she returned safely to her spiritual father within 10 minutes. Immediately after that, she ran home in the same manner. And as soon as she arrived and locked the door behind her, she heard machine guns firing. Maria's greatest concern was always for her brother, and even more so during the years of the war and the occupation. When George first moved to Athens, Maria supported him financially, depriving herself of even the most basic necessities. One year during Great Lent, she reached the point of eating only bread and water. She also had a debt she owed for some medications, which she had to pay off by Pascha. Due to her extreme weakness, Maria was afraid she would not be able to attend the service of the resurrection. Her deprivation was so great that she did not even have money to buy a Pascha candle. Holy Saturday arrived and she went to church and was praying to the Lord using her prayer rope, timidly complaining that on such an important day she did not even have a candle to bring forward at the hymn, "Come Receive the Light." Seeing her so sorrowful, a lady approached her and asked if she needed anything. Maria asked if she would buy her a candle, saying that she would repay her as soon as she was able. At the moment when the priest read the resurrection gospel, "In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God," she heard it so loudly she would later narrate as if all the radios in the world were broadcasting it. From this intense experience of divine grace, she lost consciousness, and when she came to, these words remained branded in her soul, giving her a feeling of divine satiation. Throughout the entire Pascha service, she heard these words over and over again while experiencing an inexpressibly sweet taste, and an ineffable fragrance penetrated her entire being. Immediately, her hunger and physical exhaustion subsided. In later years, Eurydice would describe with great humility this spiritual state that she experienced as a gift from God, who sweetens and consoles those in great deprivation and poverty with his grace. During these difficult years of the occupation, Maria had the blessing to meet several virtuous and God-gifted people in Athens when she went to visit her brother. On one such visit, she had heard of a very ascetic elder with the gift of foresight who lived in a secluded area of Camenia in Piraeus. One morning, without having eaten anything, she crossed herself and set out to find him. She had no knowledge of his address, nor did she have anyone to guide her. Once it became dark, she began to worry. She knocked on the door of a small house nearby to ask for help, and immediately the reverend elder, whom she was seeking, answered the door. The God-gifted elder welcomed her and invited her in, saying that he had been waiting for her all day. With fatherly love, he gave her something to eat and counseled her, at the same time revealing to her many things about her life. Deeply benefited, Maria took his blessing and left with great joy. In another area of Athens, there lived a pious elderly woman named Nicoletta, who was originally from Asia Minor. Gerondissa Nicoletta had a miraculous icon of the Panagia, from which at times a knocking sound could be heard, and then the image of the Theotokos would disappear. The Panagia would miraculously come out of the icon and appear to people as a nun, and after some time would return. The same knocking sound would be heard once more, and her image would reappear again on the icon. Many people asked the old woman for the icon, but she would not give it to anyone. When Maria heard about the miracles that this icon performed for the faithful, she decided to visit Gerondissa Nicoletta in order to take her blessing and venerate the icon. When she confided in Gerondissa about her monastic calling, she looked at Maria intently and said to her, "I will give the icon to you. Take it." Upon receiving it, Maria promised that she would pray for her always, and after the Gerondissa departed from this life, she would take care of all of the memorial services for the repose of her soul. As Maria grew in age and virtue, so her love for Christ also increased. The divine yearning to be worthy one day to venerate the Holy Land, where the God-man walked, was cultivated in her soul. Due to her poverty, she knew that it would be extremely difficult for this pilgrimage to become a reality, but eventually, the opportunity arose for her to go to Jerusalem with 3 women she knew. Because she sent all her money to her brother to cover his rent, she decided to borrow money for the expense of this trip. But as she considered her brother's financial difficulties, she decided to cancel her pilgrimage and returned the money she had borrowed, explaining the reason. During the time her acquaintances were on the pilgrimage and Maria remained at home, she saw her guardian angel in a vision, and he said to her, "Come, let us go to the Holy Land." While Maria wondered how this could possibly happen, he took her by the hand, and she found herself with him in the Holy Land. As her angel guided her through all the holy sites, she saw that she was wearing a white gown decorated with red crosses like a baptismal garment. He took her first to Nazareth to venerate the holy church of the Annunciation of the Theotokos. The angel explained, saying, "Come and see, sister, here Christ was made flesh." And he chanted the Apolytikion for the Annunciation. Today is the prelude of our salvation. Then he took her to Bethlehem. They descended the stairs that led to the cave of the Nativity of Christ, and the angel said, "Come and see, sister, here Christ was born." And he chanted the Apolytikion, "Thy Nativity, O Christ our God." Following this was Holy Golgotha. "Come and see, sister, here Christ was crucified." And again the angel chanted, "You ransomed us from the curse of the law." He then guided her to the Holy Sepulchre. "Come and see, sister, here Christ was buried and resurrected." And again he chanted the Apolytikion, "Christ is risen." The movement from one holy site to the other happened very quickly, as if there was no distance between them. Everything that Maria beheld was engraved deeply in her soul. Throughout their pilgrimage to the Holy Land, the three ladies saw Maria walking ahead of them at every holy site. When they returned to Volos and saw her, they complained to her that she had hidden from them the fact that she was going to Jerusalem. Seeing her sacrificial and merciful intentions, divine providence took her there in a spiritual way, thus fulfilling her fervent zeal and desire for the all-holy pilgrimage. Years later, Gerondissa related that when she visited the Holy Land with some of her synodia in 1971, she remembered everything in great detail. Even though it was her first visit there, she knew the way to each holy site, and she walked through the area with such ease and familiarity that it amazed the sisters. During this trip, out of her deep love for Christ, Gerondissa desired to leave her soul at his holy tomb and holy Golgotha. She wanted to offer something especially worthy as a sacrifice to God, even the shedding of her own blood. During the pilgrimage through the land where God himself walked, Gerondissa Makrina became ill with acute inflammation of the lungs and constantly coughed up blood. The doctor who examined her diagnosed her condition as extremely severe and was unable to provide any remedy. Only God could heal her with a miracle. At this time, the chandelier in the church at the monastery in Portaria fell to the ground, and the sisters who had remained behind wondered if Gerondissa and the sisters in Jerusalem were in danger. Gerondissa, however, maintained a firm hope and assurance in her soul that she would not die. She strongly felt the grace of God. Although she in fact regained her health, through her illness, her holy desire to honor the venerable passion of our Lord with the humble sacrifice of her own blood became a reality. Throughout that pilgrimage, she felt a strong divine transformation, as if venerating the actual pure wounds of Christ and his holy blood. Due to her great reverence and faith, Gerondissa was made worthy to visit Jerusalem 4 times with sisters from the monastery up until 1980. Here we'll end the first half of the life of Gerondissa Makrina from the book Words of the Heart. An absolutely beautiful life. I held it together. I was ready to begin losing it at one point, but we will read the second half, and hopefully that video will come out about a week after this one comes out. As I encouraged you at the beginning, please, 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 if you've been moved or helped by this video in any way, please share it. Please share it. I really pray that Gerondissa Makrina blesses this effort so that her life can spread, and love for her, for the Panagia, for Christ can spread as well. Again, this is all from the book Words of the Heart, with the blessing of the abbess of St. John the Forerunner Monastery in Goldendale, Washington. You can go to their website to purchase this book, which is full of her homilies. The life is a very short part of it. Her homilies take up the vast majority. Well worth it. May we have the intercessions of Gerondissa Makrina with us today and always. Amen.